Awesome. So we are going to move into Brandon's talk. Brandon currently works for Compose, a production-ready cloud-hosted database provider. If you aren't familiar with Compose, you may have been familiar with it under its previous name of MongoHQ, which it had until August of last year. Brandon joins us today as the creator of Octopress, a massively popular fork of Jekyll. Some people have considered Octopress a completely separate product to Jekyll, but I know that back in January of this year, Brandon wrote a very interesting blog post on the Octopress website about the future of Octopress, the upcoming 3.0 release, and in that blog post, Brandon very clearly talked about disliking the notion of any us and them mentality between the Jekyll and Octopress communities. There is only an us, so I'm looking forward to what Brandon has to talk about with the Octopress. I'll hand over to you, Brandon.
All right, hello nerds. It's awesome to be able to be here and present at JekyllConf. Let's see, I'm gonna go ahead and pull up my slides so you don't have to look at me for any longer. All right, is that sharing yet? Is this coming through?
Not sharing yet.
Not yet now? Anytime soon?
No.
Make sure. Oh, because I need to accept the screen sharing button. All right. Now, here we go.
Awesome, we're working now.
Okay, all right. So I'm still Brandon Mathis, and I still work at Compose, and you can internet me all over the place at iMathis. I also want to thank the Cloud Cannon folks for organizing the first JekyllConf and for not calling it a webinar. It's awesome that people can watch us anywhere for free, and I hope at least some of you are not wearing any pants. Let's see. Whoa. Keynote just crashed, so that's good. Just a second. Didn't plan time for Keynote crashing. So hope it don't go long. Here we go. Oops. Let me pick my slide. Sorry about this. All right. There we go. So I'm excited to talk about Octopress 3, but I'm going to give a little origin story first. I came to the static site party from the design world, and in 2009 I left WordPress behind and got started with Jekyll. I built a Jekyll site with a few handy rake tasks, and I kept the source on GitHub, as you do. And one day, Chris Epstein, who created Compass and maintains SAS, forked my blog and asked me for some design help so it wouldn't look like a complete ripoff. Well, I was a big fan of SAS and Compass, and working with Chris was pretty exciting for me, so I created a version of my blog without any content and a more generic theme, and I named it Octopress. Now, not many people use that, just some developer friends of mine, but in 2011, I really wanted to make it better, so I took a few months off of work and just spent the whole time working on Octopress. I designed a nicer theme, added some fancy new rake tasks, and some plugins. And I built a nice documentation site. I released it as version 2.0, and somebody posted about it on Hacker News, and suddenly I had lots of users, pull requests, and responsibilities. In fact, at one point, Octopress was in the top 25 forked repositories on GitHub. I had no idea how to handle any of this, and I made a lot of mistakes, which you can find out about here. This is the post that he was talking about earlier. With my inexperience as a designer working on a product for developers, I didn't really know what I was doing, and I needed some more street smarts so that I wouldn't accept pull requests that are too clever or just do stupid things myself. And there were three things that I was really afraid to learn, but I knew would make Octopress better. I wanted to have a real command line interface because Rake is great for adding tasks, but it doesn't replace a good CLI. I wanted to build on everything in Ruby gems because as I learned, Git is for collaborating on source code, not for shipping products. And I wanted to write tests for things. I was scared of writing tests. I still don't know Cucumber and all this sort of things that all you Ruby nerds know. And I was manually testing everything, and it sucked. It was terrible. So a couple of years ago, Parker Moore helped me get my mojo back and conquer some of these fears. And he helped me find a good direction for the new Octopress. Now, the biggest failing of Octopress was that I think it kind of split the Jekyll community. And even though Octopress was really just a bunch of stuff bolted on to Jekyll in a Git repository you could fork, it did so much that Jekyll felt like a different product. So I want to put that behind me, and everything I've been working on for version 3 is built with a focus to fully embrace Jekyll. So first I'm going to talk about the Octopress CLI. It isn't a repository that you fork. It's a Ruby gem, and there are a whole bunch of more Ruby gems that you can use optionally with Octopress. But the CLI replaces the old rake tasks and adds some nice new ways to interact with your Jekyll blog. So this talk is mostly code demos. I have pre-recorded them so I don't screw up and so that I'll be able to get them done in enough time, but if anything gets weird, that's why. So first we're going to look at what it's like to work with posts. All right, so I added a whole bunch of generators to Octopress. Let's go ahead and create a new site, and that's with Octopress new. And this actually runs Jekyll new and adds some of Octopress's site scaffolding on top. So jumping into demo, I'm going to add a new post, and I give it a title. And here we go. Puts it in the post directory with the right date and the title. So if I jump in here, you can see that there's a layout added. There's a title, which is title cased, and the date even has the time zone, which is useful. And so I'm going to show you where this basic default stuff comes from. There's a template directory, and you can have templates for drafts, pages, or posts, or whatever you want. And this is what that looks like. I'm going to go ahead and create a sponsor template. And I can make changes to the YAML front matter, as well as add content. So for my pretend sponsor, I'm going to go ahead and create a post, and this will be a post as if QuickLens, this app I've been using and enjoying a lot lately, is sponsoring my site. And to use the sponsor template, I just use the template flag and pass the name of the file. And you don't need extensions. All right, so there's my new post, and I can jump in there and see that it worked. I can fill in the information that I want. But this is just a great way to have a quick boilerplate for creating new types of content. All right, now let's see. So this is great if you want to add all kinds of new posts, and you can have a template date. I didn't show that. I didn't show dir. Date lets you specify date. You can use regular date strings. Dir is if you like to put your posts in subdirectories and organize them under the post directory. And slug lets you set a smaller URL slug if you have a long title. So next up is pages, and these are really a lot like posts and fairly simple. Except instead of a title, they accept a path. So I just use about, and it defaults to HTML as the extension. And you can configure that as well. So here's my new page. Doesn't have a title, so now I'll pass a title. All right, and I'm going to force so that it overwrites the ones. There it is. Now I can also add a date to a page. Sometimes for documentation pages or something, you want to have a date. And I use now. It'll convert that to the current time with the time zone. Now I can also, if I want to use a different extension than I normally do, so if I want to do a markdown page, I can just add .md, and it'll generate the page as a markdown file. And another cool thing is if you end a path with a slash like this, it will automatically create an index.html page for you. And if you have your default extension set to markdown, it'll be index.markdown or whatever else you want. All right, so this is a cool little tool for prolific writers who want to quickly preview changes without waiting for lots of other posts to build. The isolate command takes a path or search string, and if it matches more than one file, it will give you a list to choose from. In this case, I'm going to use the character A, which will match all of my posts, and I'm going to go ahead and pick number 2. If it only matches 1, it just isolates that. And so now this puts all the other posts in an exile directory that will not be built with your site. And so it just your one post is showing there. Now I can run integrate to copy them all back. So as you can imagine, if you have tons of posts, this lets you build your site a lot faster. All right, next up is drafts. Jekyll 2 added support for drafts, and Octopress makes it easy to work with them. I really like this one. Okay, so I'm going to create a new draft. It's just like a post. You pass it a title, and it plops it into the drafts directory. Now, if I want to add some content, I am going to do that here, and then I'm going to publish this draft. Now, the publish command works just like the isolate command, where it'll match a search string or take a path. And now this moves from the drafts directory into my posts directory. Now, if I change I know it adds a date too, which is nice. So if I change my mind and I want to unpublish it, I can run unpublish, and it works the same way, matching the search string here, and it unpublishes it back to my drafts directory. So working with drafts, it's just a little bit easier this way. All right, so deployment. Actually, yeah. So yeah, new draft, publish draft, unpublish post, pretty easy. So let's talk about deployment. If your Jekyll needs are simple, GitHub Pages does a great job of building and deploying your Jekyll site. But if you augment your site with plugins, you need to deploy your site some other way. Now, Octopress has always supported rsync and Git deployment, but it has never really been this nice. And I'll show you how this works. So I can generate a deploy.yaml, which Octopress uses to configure your deployment settings. And this is how I do this. I say deploy init, and then I tell it what kind, in this case Git. I pass it the string for my Git URL, and then gives me this configuration file. Now I'm going to go ahead and edit this and change my branch to GH because I'm deploying this blog there. And then I just run Octopress deploy. Or actually, no, let me generate my site first. Got to remember that. And then run Octopress deploy. And there we go, syncs it up. Now I'll jump over to the GitHub site and show you what happens here. So I can jump over to my GH branch, and it shows that it created a commit automatically with the site updated at time. Now this is similar to how the other Octopress 2 worked, but it's a lot nicer with the configuration and everything. And it creates a little hidden deploy directory, and you can see that it adds a remote, and it has basically a shallow clone for just my GH branch, and it keeps that in sync. So it's pretty nice. You can also deploy with rsync, and it works the same way. I'm just going to generate a little configuration file for rsync. So let's see here. And in this case, I'm going to use the config flag to tell it to generate a different YAML file. Now here I can configure all of the settings for an rsync command, all the flags and everything. And to deploy, I would pass config and then the deployment file that I wanted to use. So this is really great if you want to have a staging site or preview a blog post or a draft for somebody. You can build with the draft set to true and then push it off to somewhere else, or you can even use different Git repositories. So yeah, it's pretty cool there. And also with this, I've added support for deploying to Amazon S3 and CloudFront. So I'm going to create an S3 config file, and I do this using the Amazon S3 SDK. So let me go ahead and init this with a different config, and it looks like this. Now, if you don't want to put your site access ID and your keys, all that fancy stuff, in there, it'll read from your environment variables too, and you deploy just like the other way with S3 YAML. So that is deployment. Oh, I forgot to mention, you can also pull, which is cool. So if you wanted to see, did this deployment work, you can run Octopress deploy pull, give it a path, and it will download your site. This is from rsync, this will be from Git, this is from wherever, whatever your deployment style is, or you can pass the config flag to tell it to use a certain file, and you can reverse your site deploy to check to see if it all worked. So that's cool. Because I'm using the Amazon SDK, you can even add buckets from, like you can just do Octopress deploy, add bucket if your S3 is your default deploy, and give it a bucket name. When it pushes, it will automatically configure your S3 bucket for static site hosting. So there's all kinds of cool stuff with Octopress deploy. All right, let's talk about Jekyll plugins. This is what I'm really excited to talk to you about today. Writing a plugin for Jekyll is super simple. You just drop a slice of Ruby into your plugins directory, and bam, you just hacked your site. So this simplicity is great for getting started with Jekyll, but it's a terrible pattern for sharing code with one another. I know because I have made this terrible sin many times. Jekyll worships at the altar of the file system, and that's how our plugins work. As a newbie getting started with Jekyll, I just figured copy and paste was how things go. But that kind of sucks. So we need to embrace Ruby gems as a system for distributing Jekyll plugins. You know, you wouldn't shop at a store that looked like your closet, but that's what many of our open source Jekyll plugins look like. Now, asking users to copy and paste stuff into the right folders and files is not great. I mean, there's nothing easier than uploading your sock drawer. But the Jekyll community needs us to do better, and that's why I've spent the last year and a half building Octopress Inc. And of course, the answer can't be just put it all in a Ruby gem. I mean, we're building websites. And websites are more than just Ruby. We have JavaScript, HTML, CSS, images, and fonts. All of these assets need to be integrated into a Jekyll site source to work properly. So what do I suggest? Put it in a Ruby gem. Octopress Inc. is a Jekyll plugin framework which handles the asset management and distributes them through Ruby gems. It's really cool. So I'm going to show you how this works with a little footnote plugin that I wrote this week. So if you have had experience reading a site with markdown footnotes, you know what these look like, right? You've got a little link somewhere, and you click it, it jumps you down to the bottom of a sea of footnotes, and then there's a little link that jumps you back to the top. It's not a great experience, but for HTML, it's pretty good. But there's this nice plugin called Bigfoot.js, and it displays footnotes as popovers so you don't lose your place. It looks kind of like this. All right. Now, this is a great reading experience, but Bigfoot.js requires jQuery. Now, I'm a happy citizen of the post-jQuery world, and I wanted to give Jekyll authors a way to offer this experience with native JavaScript. So I built Littlefoot.js. Now, it's just a JavaScript and a Sass style sheet. It's entirely a front-end feature, and this is not a typical Jekyll plugin. Now, before, the only way to integrate this into a Jekyll site was the usual smash and grab, copy and paste job, but with Octopress Inc., this is way easier. Now, I'm going to show you how to build these things, but first I want to show you what it's like for a Jekyll user to add Littlefoot to their site. All right, now I'm using the built-in Jekyll scaffolding, and I've already added some footnotes to a welcome post. You can see them here. Now I can show you what this looks like in the browser. Just boot up the server. All right, there we go. There's one of the footnotes. There's another one. If I click these, they jump me down to the page, and I have to remember which number I clicked, and then when I jump back, it's not really where I was. It's not really a great experience. So we're going to go ahead and install Octopress Littlefoot. So I add that to the gems. And then I'm going to add the asset tag. Now this is, once you install this for any Octopress Inc. plugin, they all work. This will write the link tags and the script tag for the plugins that I'm using. Now when I refresh, I automatically get nice little popovers. Cool. And see, the footnotes are gone from the bottom there. So if I can run, Octopress Inc. list, and this shows me the Octopress Inc. plugins I have installed. Got Littlefoot, the slug for the Octopress Littlefoot. The slug is Littlefoot and has a description. Now I can actually run list Littlefoot to find out more about this plugin. So I have Sass files, I have JavaScript, there's configuration. The theme is right now set to light, and I want to change that. So I'm going to copy, instead of list, I'm going to change this to copy Littlefoot. And I only want to copy the configuration file because that's what I want to change. But I could override Sass or JavaScript too. Now this copies it into the override location, which is in plugins, and then whatever the slug for my plugin is, and then the type of asset. So I'm going to get rid of that. I only really want to change the theme. Now I just save this, and let me boot up the. Actually, I'll show you the configuration now. You can see when I run this again, just showing the configuration, it says, "Hey, look, you changed it to dark." So success. Now if I boot up the server, refresh, and now I have dark footnotes. So this to me is how Jekyll plugins should feel. I think this is awesome, and I get these nice fingerprinted asset files for JavaScripts and style sheets, and they're all smashed down, and you can change the compression settings if you want to. You can see that it writes the link and script tags, and any new plugin that's added, it generates a new fingerprinted file. You can even say don't combine them, and it'll generate separate link and script tags if you want to debug something. It's really nice. Okay, so also I want to talk about code plugins real quickly. These are the bread and butter of Octopress. I love getting geeks to write, and having nice code plugins is a big part of that. So here's what it's like to add a few Octopress code plugins to a site. So Octopress Code Fence is not built on Octopress Inc., but Solarized is. Both of these are very simple to install. I'll run Octopress Inc. list so you can see that Solarized is there, and that styles it. This is really just a SAS file with some configuration. I'll show you what that looks like. All right, cool. So now I'm going to change the default example of code here to using the code fence. And boot up the server. Refresh, and there you go. That's how easy it is to integrate this sort of a plugin. It's pretty nice. But we want to do more than that. I'll show you this other cool thing. This is feeds. RSS feeds are pretty simple, but this plugin is actually pretty powerful. It supports categories, tag feeds, collection feeds, and a whole lot more. And it comes with some built-in partials. So I'm kind of going to show you how to override a partial. All right. So let me install this. And you can see here that it is installed. It comes with a bunch of stuff, lots of configuration, some includes, some templates, and category feeds is set to false by default because you don't really need that kind of stuff, honestly. But if you really want it, you can change it. I'm copying the includes and the configuration for overriding. You can see there the includes, and I'm going to change the config file category feeds to true. And then I'm going to modify the head with just a little meta tag so we can see, yes, this is working. Now, only the things that are in these directories will override. I can remove entry, and it will revert back to what's in the gem. Jekyll build, and then I'm going to show you what our feeds look like. So now we have an index HTML, index XML there with our meta tag, and I have feeds for the categories. So that's cool. All right, so Inc. plugins are easy to install. They have their own configurations. They integrate front-end assets and are really easy to customize. So let's build one. I'm going to create a theme because that is kind of the really exciting part of all this. And this is going to be super simple, so it's not going to look great. But so I can use Octopress Inc. new simple theme, and I'm going to say I want it to be a theme. Now this is the bundler gem scaffolding with some Octopress flavor added to it. So I'm going to jump in there. And I'm going to go ahead and fill out the gem spec a little bit, remove some stuff that we don't need for this use case here. And then in simple theme, I can just, you see that I have a slug is set to theme by default. That's what the slug should be for a theme. For a plugin, it's going to be plugin. Or actually, it's going to be the name of the plugin. Now, this registers it, and see, I've got this assets directory. Anything I put in this assets directory automatically gets made available to the site. It's really cool. So my config goes in that config YAML, and pages, layouts, JavaScripts, all that stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and add a layout, because that's like the first thing you do with a theme. So default HTML. All right. So here's a boilerplate, very simple layout. I got my page title, my CSS and JS asset tags, and my content. Now, actually, I'm going to move the stuff out of the head into a partial because it's easier for the users to edit little things if they want to. If they want to add something to the head, they can do it here. So now I create a new partial, a new include called head, and to reference that from my layout, I've actually hacked the include tag, and so now it accepts plugin slug : and it tells the include to actually read that from the Ruby gem itself. And then I'm going to add a page. Now the same thing I've done with layouts as well. So if I add layout, then I can say theme : default, and it knows to look into the Ruby gem for that layout. So here's just some quick content. Now I'm going to include theme article. I haven't written that include yet, but it's just to make it because the difference between post and page isn't very much. But the user can edit them if they want to have a different layout for posts and pages. All right, so here's a basic article. Very simple. I don't even have a date. Just content and a title. That's all you need. No. Anyway, I'm going to add a template, and this one's kind of fancy. I'll talk about it a little bit more in a bit, but this is just an index page. So my post index, it uses the same layout, and it's going to have a post loop. So I run through all my loops. It's a typical post loop you've seen before, and it will generate, it's got excerpts and the continue reading link, all that good stuff. Cool. Now, actually, before I use this, I'm going to make one change here. I wanted to put the site title in. We're about to install this plugin in our demo site, and you'll see what that looks like, but I'm going to make one other change. I'm going to put a little meta flag so we can see easily that it's all working. Cool. All right, now I'm going to git add because this is Bundler's Ruby gem scaffold uses git to find all the files. And then to install it in our demo, I've actually switched from using the Jekyll's gem configuration to the bundler, so I can use a path to the bundler gem file, so I can use a path. Anyway, so I point that to there, and there's this other cool thing I'm going to do. I'm actually going to add to the config YAML, I'm going to add inc watch, and this can accept an array. In this case, I'm just going to say theme, and what that does is it tells Jekyll's server to watch that gem path for changes, and it will rebuild the site automatically. So now the watcher not only watches your site, but it also watches your gem, so you can really easily do rapid development. So I'm going to change the post and put theme in there. A second ago I deleted the index.html so that our plugin could provide that. Now when I hit save, it automatically generated a new index.html. You can see hi from Octopress Inc. And there's my super simple template. And here's the post, same deal. And it's got my link tags and everything. Now when I refresh this, it looks terrible because I don't have any style sheets yet. But that's okay because we're going to address that. And you can see what it's like to add style sheets. So I'm just going to call it theme SCSS. It doesn't matter what you call it. You can have as many of these as you want to. You can use partials. It's all pretty smooth. When I hit refresh, now I've got styles. So yeah, that's pretty much how it looks to build a Octopress Inc. plugin. I'm going to show you another thing really quickly. Multilingual blogging is something I really care about. I am not multilingual. I just feel like it should be something people can do easily. So Octopress Inc. is built with that in mind, and that post index file we added, that template, is actually multilingual by default, and I'll show you what that looks like here. So I'm going to add Octopress Multilingual as a gem. And then I'm going to change, I'm going to add the default language for our site, which in this case is English. And I'm going to add a language for this post. Now I'm going to also create a German version of this post. And change the language to German. I'm not going to rewrite this whole post in German. So it'll be here a while. Also, I can't do that because I don't know German. So now I save, hit Jekyll build, and I'll show you what happens. Now a couple of things here. All of a sudden we've got our index.html. This will only show the default language for my site. So whatever my default language is my main index. I also have a German index, and my German post shows up in that index. I also have a German feed. The feeds plugin is built with the same templating system, so you can have German feeds, German categories, German tag feeds, like all kinds of stuff like that. It's really great. So that is the multilingual features. Now, there's this other cool thing, documentation, which is really important. So all Octopress Inc. plugins have a really cool way to interact with documentation. So I can say Octopress docs, and that will actually boot up a documentation site. You can actually build stuff. You don't have to have Octopress Inc. You can build stuff with doc support. Any kind of Ruby gem can have this, but Inc. has it by default. See, here's our simple theme. Like, we just built this today, and it has little docs, and it's all your local docs. It looks at your gem file, looks at what's on your system, and it will just show you that for your specific version. So if you have one site, you've got an old version of a plugin, you can read the docs of that plugin. It'll do changelog, it'll do readme. It just sucks that stuff in from the gem. And there are even assets where you can, so like you saw the assets directory with all those folders in there. You can add docs to there's a docs asset. You can add a bunch of docs to that, and it will automatically add those in here and provide links to them on the docs page. Now, this needs some styling. This is not very finished, but hey, the feature's pretty cool because it's actually serving this site and building it from the gem. So cool. All right, now there's one other thing, and this is the last thing that I said I was afraid of, is testing the stuff I'm building. I built a lot of stuff, and if I didn't have good tests for these, I would hate myself. So I wrote a diff-based testing framework for Jekyll plugins. And I'm going to demo that for you real quick. So in order to make this a simple demo, I'm going to add a really little liquid tag. It's a kitten tag, and it renders. Then I register it as a kitten tag. And now I'm going to create a Clash testing scaffold for it with Clash new. So this adds a new scaffold there in test. I have a Clash YAML. This is where I configure my tests. I've got a title. The directory scopes everything to test site. Build is telling it to build Jekyll, and then it compares expected with the generated site. So I'm going to add my gem, and then I don't need the layout. It's just extra noise. So I'm just going to say test kitten, and then use my little plugin here. All right, now I can run Clash, and it will generate my site and diff it to the expected directory. Now you can see that I have style sheets that are generated in there. Notice the fingerprint is missing. That's so tests don't fail unreasonably. And my test kitten mu is not there. I can actually run Clash accept, since I only have one test, to accept that, and it will copy it over and then run it. Now here's, in my Octopress, this is the whole CLI is tested with Clash. Here's a list of my tests. I can run individual tests, like just by passing the number, and I can run groups of tests, like 2 to 4 and 6, and that looks like this. Actually, I'll pull up the Clash file for you. So Clash has tasks. It has before and after stuff. You can run shell scripts before and after things to make things work well. It is, I'm going to run the test on line 35 even, so you can do this kind of a thing. Now there's a whole bunch about Clash that you can do here that's cool. I'm not going to be able to show all of it. I could do a pretty long talk on that. Maybe it's terrible, but it certainly helps me ship a bunch of stuff with confidence. So anyway, that's my talk. If we have any questions, any time for that. One preemptive question, I use the name Octopress still because I want to have it be like a seal of quality. This means that it can work with other Octopress plugins well, that it has tests, that it does all these great things. But especially it's because I want to namespace my gems so I can pick the names that I like freely. So anyway, that's it.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Brandon. I think you headed off a question or two there with talking about keeping the Octopress name. On that line of thought, though, do you want to expand a little bit more about how you do see the communities together and the path of development of both Jekyll and Octopress in the future?
So I guess some of that looked kind of a little magic-y. It isn't really. It's just it's working with Jekyll the way Jekyll is expected to be worked with. Just kind of it uses hooks, which Octopress has an Octopress hooks plugin that when different things happen, it calls out and lets me modify things. Like the multilingual plugin looks for on the read of all the posts. When that happens in Jekyll, it says, hey, find all the plugins that have a language thing, and then it looks to see if there's a default language for the post. It does things like you would expect a real Jekyll plugin to do. It just has a lot more access to Jekyll because of the hooks. I really like Jekyll. I think it's fantastic. I think one of the problems that we have is that we don't have a simple way to get developers to build really sweet stuff for it. So, for example, you can't have a theme picker. You know, you can't be like, I want to install this theme. I just want to have these features. Or like, I mean, I was like some of the plugins I've written are really tiny. Like you just put it out there, and I can bundle that with a theme, so I know a theme has all these features, but it doesn't have to implement them all, or say it can depend on things because it uses the Ruby gems dependency. I think this is just, to me, the way I look at Octopress is it's kind of it does the things that maybe is too scary for Jekyll to do, because Jekyll needs to work and be simple. And really, like this, I showed a lot of stuff that looks complex and kind of crazy, but all of these things are small individual pieces that you can use or not use. And as you see, as you build up a site, like the multilingual stuff, there's a whole bunch of other things I didn't show, but plugins that work together in cool ways so that they can be developed independently, but you can also have a pretty sweet blog. So I don't know if I answered any question.
No, that's cool. It's interesting thinking about Octopress potentially being the bleeding edge of the Jekyll space. Tying that into a question that Tom's raised on the Twitter feed, you know, is there a process for taking, or have you discussed this with Parker about taking things that work in Octopress into Jekyll Core? What does that look like?
There is a pull request to take the generators that I wrote, the Octopress new page, post, draft, all that kind of stuff, and bring it into, not a pull request, an issue. Someday there will hopefully be a pull request. Cool features like that, things that make sense for Jekyll to do, I am totally fine with Jekyll taking. I have no. I just want to make the whole community better, and I also don't want to, you know, bottle up their release. Like they have their own priorities. I don't want to get in the way of that. I just want to build cool stuff and be like, hey, if you like it, you can have it. This is MIT. Do whatever you want. Yeah, take whatever you want.
Awesome. I mean, you're really obviously a really giving developer in terms of your thought process around that. I mean, do you have any other advice for other developers that want to contribute either to Octopress or Jekyll or other projects? You know, what's the best way for them to get stuck in?
Wow, that would be really wonderful. I've been kind of working on my own for a long time. A lot of these features took a long time to make sense. You know, Octopress Inc. was a lot of me banging my head against a wall until it felt good. And I think finally I have enough plugins to show the vision. And so really now I think, especially with the opportunity to present here, I think people will get the idea of what I'm trying to build. And if they're on board and they understand that, you know, hit me up in the issues, try this stuff, break it, tell me what's wrong with it. I'm a designer who just decided to make this stuff really fun to use, and I'm doing all kinds of things wrong. So help me out with that, please. So yeah, I'm looking for help.
Cool.
I don't know how to other than help.
Help's probably a good start.
Yep.
Awesome. So I believe has it been more than 2 years since the last full Octopress release?
So I kind of kicked along trying to make my giant mistakes palatable for several years. 2011 is when I released version 2, sometime in August, like right before my daughter was born. And that was I was like baby-driven development, you know? So since then, I've been kind of working on, I always wanted it to be like this, but I just didn't have the skills. And so I've been building those skills and trying to make the vision come together. And the biggest piece, the thing that's held me off the most, is trying to get a sense of the plugin framework that I want. Because I'm a designer. Like, Jekyll's great, but I want to have all of the stuff that I can do built into that. and I want other designers to be able to build really great themes for Jekyll without having to know how to mess with Ruby gems. Like you just like that Ruby gem was a rake deploy, rake release away from being on Ruby gems. I even looked. Simple theme is available in case you want to steal that. When I was naming Clash, I wrote a little bash script that would curl Ruby gems and looking for 404s so I could find names that were missing. And finally, I was like, all right, Clash, that's sweet. So, yeah.
Cool. Time for one more question from Ben Gundy Shepherd from the Twitter stream. Does Octopress Dev require MacVim?
No, that's just what I like to use. Yeah, you can use whatever you want to. It's just like Jekyll. I'm just using it requires a command line, but it works wherever Jekyll works, and it will always, as much as I can help it.
Awesome. Well, we'll end your session there, Brandon. I think there's potentially a few more questions in the Twitter stream waiting for you when you jump back in there.
Might do a Periscope later.
Do you have any final comments before we close up?
Thanks so much for putting this on. This has been a blast. I'm excited to finally get to show this to people. I moved Octopress to 3.0 and Octopress Inc. to 1.0 today, a few minutes ago. So you don't have to type -- pre anymore. I still need to do a lot of documentation on Octopress Inc. It's super sweet, but that's kind of my next goal, and then finishing up the theme. So anyway, try it and help me.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Brandon.